So it all comes down to this. This is a chart of global energy consumption across many decades, 1800 on the left, 2019 on the right. And this is all different forms of energy, right? So you got your fossil fuels in there, coal, oil, natural gas, got nuclear. If you can see it, maybe in the back this will be hard, but there's little smears right on the top there, solar, wind, right? They're tiny. Even though they've been growing by large amounts, solar has now grew 50%, and coal use grew by 3%. The 3% was way bigger than the 50% because it was larger to begin with. Now, the thing I need you to take away from this chart is what shape is this, right? It's a nonlinear shape. Everybody in power who knows how the world works grew up during that steep part right there when we, as a species on the planet, were just taking more and more and more high, tasty, net energy fossil fuels that have an extraordinary energy return on investment for us. And all of that is why we're in this room and why the economy works, and we should be paying very careful attention to where the prosperity actually comes from, because it comes from the energy. This is the headwaters of prosperity. All the rest are interesting things we do with it. So again, this is a non-linear chart. Now, why do I persist on this so much? Well, this is a chart from my book, and you just take two things, GDP on the y-axis and energy consumption, or oil consumption in this case, across the x-axis. And you notice there's a really tight line here. This starts in 1975 on the left, goes up through 2021, 0.93 R squared, which means if you want to understand how big the economy is, you get 93% explanatory power by answering the question, how much oil was burned? Of course, it makes sense, right? If you want to build something, move something, mine something, manufacture something, cook something, there's oil involved in that somehow. It is the prime feedstock. So we should be really eyes right on what's going on with the oil situation, because energy, in this case oil, it is the economy, not the other way around. So, as Joseph mentioned, we have a little bit of a religion problem going on right now, and by which I mean it's the religion of green energy. It's very clear, this is a New York Times piece, just came out on June 12th, that says, hey, when you actually look at it, you know, the electric grid isn't ready for this energy transition we're going down. Of course it isn't. I mean, that's like simple, like engineering 101. I mean, this shouldn't be a revelation to anybody. It's obvious that our electric grid is not ready for prime time to transition. Now, that doesn't actually faze people in California. They're getting ready to make this transition nonetheless. And this is religion. This is not science. They're just saying, you know what, let's just legislate it. You know what, we'll just make a law, and people will have to drive electric cars. And you know, good thing California's doing that, because here's California's domestic oil production. If you can spot a trend on a chart, get to me, because I'm still a little confused about what this is saying. Not at all. Hey, but to make it, to really show that New York is saying, California here, hold my Bud Light, right? Kathy, thank you. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you, I'll be here all week. As part of last week's budget deal, Kathy Hochul, the governor, and the legislature ordered the New York Power Authority to shut down all of its fossil fuel plants in 7 years. This happened. I feel like I'm in a dream. I'm wearing pants, so I guess I'm not, but this is crazy. They're going to shut down their fossil fuel plants, and you know why they're doing that? They said it clearly. They said because this will force us to get on this green energy bandwagon, right? And by 2035, only new cars must also be purely electric, not even hybrid. So they went one better. Now, this is an age-old strategy. This has been used by politicians and leaders many, many times in the past, and it's called burning the boats. It's what Cortez did, landed in South America, burned the boats, so they had no choice but to go forward. It kind of motivated his men. We are in a burning the boats part of this story. I wish I was telling you this is something that might happen, that this is a risk, but it actually happened, right? This just happened. So, prediction, New York is going to absolutely be an enormous amount of trouble going forward, because they're going to pass this. All the utilities are going to, figure out what they're up to. They're going to not be investing in these things 5, 6, 7 years. New York says, wow, we made a huge mistake. Give us those, can we have those plants right now? And the answer is no, you can't. They take a long time to commission and build. And we may not even have the talent left that knows how to do that stuff if we wipe an industry out as a starting point. So it's pretty serious. Burning the boats. Now, speaking of boats, I think this is kind of how a lot of people see it going on right now. We will see continued exoduses from not just California, but from New York and other places like that. This is a really dangerous ideology. And by the way, as Joseph said, this is not a US thing. I'm picking on the US, it's where I live. You should see what they're doing in Germany. They shut down their last 3 remaining nuclear plants. Again, burn the boat strategy, because if they did that, then maybe they'd get more serious about installing this energy systems that don't work yet. They just don't work. And worse than that, so Joseph, I'm really thankful for him going first, because he gave a lot of things I can skip. He talked about the cost. Let me tell you that it's an impossibility that we're going to be able to build this alternative energy reality, this new green energy nirvana. You know why? Because of the work of Simon Michaud. He says here, hey, if we want to build this thing called alternative green energy paradise, and we're going to need, as Joseph mentioned, steel, aluminum, copper, lithium, we need these things. He asked a simple question. He said, I just circled copper on the top. First column says total metal required to produce the first generation of this new energy world we want to live in. Okay? It's going to take 4.5 billion tons of copper, right? It's just a guess. First generation, not even repairing, replacing it for second gen. Okay, well, we're mining 24 million tons per year, so if you divide those two numbers, you come up with, it's going to take 189 years to mine the copper for first generation dreams that Kathy Hochul, New York legislature, California, Germany, and other places are saying this is where we're going, and we're going to burn the boats, and we're going to go there, and they forgot to consult this table. This tells us that we're in deep religion territory, because this is a matter of belief, not science, not simple numbers. This is simple. This is simple math. How about lithium? Look at lithium. To get the lithium we think we need is going to take 1,733 years at current rates of production. So if you want to know, people ask me what I'm bullish on, mining, absolutely, because we're not even remotely ready to move into this new alternative, but we're already burning the boats to get there. So we're going to have to go forward. It's astonishing, isn't it? But it's happening. So now I got to talk real quickly about US oil production, because this is, I think, again, an area of self-deception, self-delusion that's been going on in this country for a long time, and there's a reason for that. It's okay. This is oil imports in the United States. It peaked in 2006. It's been trundling down ever since. We ever so briefly became a net oil exporter again for the first time in decades, right there at the end of this chart in 2019. And people are assuming this is a forever situation. So, this is how it is. That's how it's going to be. Right? When we look at oil production here, we had a recent peak of 13 million barrels a day in November of 2019. We've clawed all the way back up to 2.7-ish million barrels a day. This is awesome. Doing good. I'm a huge fan of the oil and gas businesses. But we have to put this in context. So here's the United States oil production over many decades, and all that green, yellow, and blue is what we would call conventional oil. That's where you stick a straw straight down in the ground, and oil comes out. You get the gushers. That red stuff is what's called tight oil, and that's shale oil. And it's brilliant, it's amazing. I know the people who work in the space. It's extraordinary technology. They drill down 10,000 feet, say in the Bakken Formation in North Dakota, turn that puppy sideways, and drill into a seam of shale that might be as thick as this room. And then go sideways for 8, 9, 10,000 feet. And then frack it, blow it apart. 40 stages, maybe 100, depending on the well. It's astonishing that they can do that. And the problem is that those wells deplete extraordinarily quickly. So this is a chart of different years of drilling and how much oil came out as a result and how fastly that goes away. So I drew a couple purple lines there to mark out what would happen in the 2015 cohort, which is that light blue, if we had just stopped drilling, if we said no more shale drilling. The question being answered here is how much oil would we have in 1 year? And the answer is 45% less. coming out of all the shale wells that had been drilled up to that point in time, because they deplete astonishingly quickly, usually about 85% depleted in just 3 years. Cool, but you got to keep drilling them. It's called the Red Queen effect. You know, you run faster and faster just to stay in place. You have to drill more and more and more and more, and then Biden steps in and really started to put a kibosh on that, and also the shale space got some appropriate shareholder religion of their own and decided to start returning money, so less went into capital. Here we are. Now again, this is another way to look at the relationship between energy, or oil in this case, and GDP, or economies. Now what we're doing, GDP up the y-axis, oil across the x. Here, this is just for 2017, just plots of different countries. So if you're a country, you burned X amount of oil and you had Y amount of GDP, and we put you as a dot on this graph. This is an extraordinary, robust, linear relationship. It's one of the tightest economic relationships I know about. The rest of them you kind of have to squint at. This one's right in your face. If you're going to have a higher GDP, you're going to be burning more oil. Period. Just how it is currently. Could it change? Sure, but over many, many decades. What happens if we burn the boats? We'll find out, at least in a couple places. Now, to sort of hammer this home, Germany is now facing again, they don't know what they're going to do for this next year's natural gas. They use natural gas, very energy-intensive things in Germany, right? So what do we got? I don't know, smelting glass, you know, making high-end aluminum alloys for BMW engine blocks, things like that, very energy-intensive businesses. And so now they've said that, hey, may be forced to wind down or even switch off industrial capacity if Ukraine's gas transit agreement isn't renewed. Well, Germany, I don't want to be your politician here, but if you're sending Leopard tanks to fight the person who's supplying your gas, you might want to think that one through, right? It's an astonishing thing to be sending armaments against the person who you are 100% dependent on for the gas you need to continue to be an industrial society, while you're shutting your nuclear plants down. You can't make sense of this. You know, Chris, help me make sense of that. I can't. But that's the world we live in right now. It's astonishing. But here we are. And so this is going to have extraordinary, easily predictable consequences. So in North Dakota, I mentioned the Bakken play. It's astonishing. It's already past peak. It looks like it's a done deal. They hit a peak back there in 2019, and they haven't recovered. They probably won't. They've actually drilled through over 60% of what's called their Tier 1 acreage. So if you're in the drilling business, particularly in the shale space, there's really good sweet spots. That's Tier 1. And there's places, it's okay, but not the best Tier 2. And then there's Tier 3, right? So guess what? Companies, individuals are rational, and so they drill into their Tier 1 acreage first. And right there at that peak is when, roughly speaking, they drilled through about 50% of their Tier 1 acreage. And so we want to keep an eyeball on when is a particular play at about 50% of Tier 1 acreage, because there's not an endless amount of shale basins. There's just a few biggies. You got your Eagle Fords, for gas you got Fayetteville, Barnett, you got Marcellus, you got the Permian, which is the biggest oil play in the United States and a world champion, all that. But North Dakota was this play called the Scoop. Again, they drilled out about 50% there in 2019. So those two are already past what we call past peak. Now, it's all about the Permian. This is New Mexico's output through the Permian. It's astonishing. Look at that. That's amazing. We're going to get more growth out of that. Because the Permian right now, and this is Texas's contribution in the Permian side, Texas is about, the whole Permian right now is about 45% through the Tier 1. Which means that if you talk to the people who are actually in the space, have those acreages, they say, around 2025, that's it. We sort of hit a peak, and then it trundles along, doesn't go down, but trundles along for a while, and then begins to go down. So 2025 is my mark in the sand where I say, that's about the time the United States maybe wakes up and says, oh, maybe this wasn't a forever thing, this shale play. It was actually a really intense, a really amazing, a really fun thing, but we should have been using that to fund whatever the next energy play was going to be, and we're not doing that. You know who is doing that? Is China. China is making extraordinary inroads with the places that actually have oil, and they're doing it with checkbook diplomacy instead of gunboat diplomacy, and that is, it's just different strategy, right? But China brokering deals between Iran in Saudi Arabia is astonishing, right? That was an amazing thing that just happened a couple months ago. So it's all about the Permian, and we should be very, very aware of that. Because here's what happens. Gering, and I don't know how to pronounce that second name, Rosenquadge? I don't know, I should learn. But they put this extraordinary report out, and there's a link down there, where they go through all of this analysis, field by field, piece by piece. They've got a model, and they say, look here at the Barnett and the Fayetteville. These are gas plays, primarily. And you can clearly see what looks like almost ideal peak oil, or in this case, peak gas sort of charts. Right? They go up, they hit a peak, and they come back down again. And no matter how much you drill in them, that's it. And that's just the nature of these fields. So these two already passed peak. Now, the Bakken and the Eagle Ford, those both in their models, they say, yeah, these are past peak. And they started running things, and they discovered it's about understanding that tier 1 acreage. And so those are past peak. So we really ought to be asking what's going on with the Permian. Because that's it. That's you know, we'll still keep drilling. I'm not saying this stuff runs out, but this idea of getting more and more is amazing. Now remember that chart I showed you that showed the United States went from importing about 13 million barrels a day all the way down to 0, very rapidly. The United States Energy Information Agency, bless their hearts, and I mean that in the southern way, has their models out that shows the United States continuing to produce 12.5 million barrels a day from its shale plays for the next 35 years. And I talk to the people in the shale space, and they say it's about 2 more where we get to hold that up, and then things begin to nose over. You couldn't have a larger gap, right? I don't know what to go with, but I always trust the people on the ground who actually put the holes in the ground and own the acreage more than the people, you know, analyzing it. All right. Meanwhile, thank you, Joe. This is our strategic petroleum reserve across many decades, and it's been absolutely plundered. This is the first US president in all of history that has been day trading gasoline prices for political purposes. But our strategic petroleum reserve turned out to be a political petroleum reserve. It's not been strategic. So whatever's coming next, we're coming into it with the same amount of oil that we had in the strategic petroleum reserve as 1985. A long time ago, right? So this is an astonishing thing. If I was running this ship, I would want to be coming into this next period of time with the most amount of inventory we possibly could. And that would be inventory in the ground that we knew about, inventory in storage like this, but that's not the situation. So when I'm asked to talk here about the relationship between economy and energy, oil is the economy. The United States is coming into this next period, my prediction's around 2025 again, give or take, and we're going to suddenly say, oh, we don't have all the oil we need anymore, we're going to have to import that. Well, who are we importing against? This is China's imports of oil. And this is a Bloomberg article. This is an astonishing thing. They are now importing 16 million barrels a day, and this chart only went up through early 2023, but we just got more data that says, this just came out on June 13th, China increased its oil imports by 20% year over year for this most recent quarter. Now, why would they be doing that? Maybe they need it. Maybe they're stockpiling it for some reasons. I don't know if you saw, but a Republican senator, Marco Rubio, and a Democratic senator got together and passed some legislation out of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee that said that the United States is going to, they're asking US agencies to get ready for how they will support Taiwan if China attacks Taiwan in any way. And that included kinetic, but also if they felt like their telecommunications were compromised or shipping or anything, well, like a whole lot of reasons. So you can feel the drumbeat is here again, and if we go into a war situation, oil shipping stops right away, and the United States suddenly discovers what it actually has or doesn't have in its cupboards, and that's when the world changes, and it could change very, very rapidly in this situation. Now, China's exposed. They don't want this. We're exposed. I don't think we want it, but we don't seem to have cooler heads, right? They're burning the boats, right? There are people in power right now who are saying, yeah, you know what? Let's do this. Let's make oil really expensive because that'll force people buying electric cars or whatever the fantasy is, right? And it's really disconnected. So with all of this, We absolutely need our money system. We have a debt-based money system that's growing, growing, growing. It needs to grow. If it hiccups, things get really dodgy. That growth comes from oil itself, and we have this extraordinary period in front of us where you should really have all eyes on what's going on with the global oil situation, because oil's a global commodity.